Hey there. Today we're going to be talking about this workbook, BK Workbook's Geography for sixth grade. We'll do a little flip through and focus on what this workbook covers, how it supports the parent or whoever's teaching through the workbook, types of activities it has for the student, and then also how specifically I'm planning to use it in my homeschool. If we haven't met, my name's Leslie Maddox. I'm an engineer turned homeschool mom to three boys, ages 15, 12, and 10. And we have some special needs in our homeschool. So I try to find curriculum that's visual and interactive and that my kids can do largely independently, where there's an independent element to it, because that works best for our homeschool. So if you're interested in more of that, be sure to follow my channel and subscribe. But for now, let's just jump into this workbook. So before we jump into the book, I want to point something out. This is for sixth grade, and I'm using it with my fifth grader this coming up year. And the reason for that is because when I looked at the reviews for these workbooks, there were several reviews that talked about it being maybe too easy, that suggested that the targeted grade may not be completely accurate. And so I looked at whatever samples I could find and thought, yeah, it's probably true. You probably can level up. And with this particular student I'm using it with, he's pretty bright. And so I thought I'm just gonna go ahead and get the sixth grade version and be done with it. So another thing I want to point out is the cost. So notice the price here is says here $6.99 USA. So pretty cost effective. It isn't a very meaty book, and we'll go into a little more into that in a minute. So I think the price is pretty good. I don't know if you can get an ebook version of this. I don't think so, because I usually like to get the ebook version, but this is so inexpensive that I don't think it matters. But, it's not that big a deal. $7 for a book. It's pretty good. All right, so let's get into the innards of this. Let's first take a look at the contents and what this workbook covers. The content goes to page 47 here. And so the way it's laid out, it looks a little bit like it's 47 lessons, but that's actually not the case. There are a couple of places I've seen where, okay, let me see if I can find one of them, like this one, Asia, Physical and Political, where what we would think of as a lesson covers 2 pages. So let me show you what I mean. Turning to that page. So see this one, this is covering Asia, Physical and Political features. And so we have the map and some teaching on one side and the cross activity on the other side on the next page. So I would consider that one lesson. So that's one thing to think about, that this isn't 47 lessons. It's maybe 45, what I would think of as a lesson, what you would cover in one day. And so this isn't something that students will be working on every day. And when you look at specifics about what they're covering, we see there's the typical geography type things going into our world, globes, map projections, the physical features, time zones. We have a section on informational maps, a section on physical features, and then we start getting into the continents, and then specifically the United States as well. So I would say this workbook is geared more for people live in the United States because it caters to us a little bit more. So you have the different continents that are covered, their physical and political features. So we'll flip through some of these pages in a minute. I just want to point something out, that when geography, no one really talks about this, or not that I've heard, but geography is one of those subjects, kind of like language arts. When you're trying to decide what your kids are gonna do for language arts, there's a lot of things to cover. There's reading, writing, spelling, grammar, handwriting, like so many things, literature. And so we have to think about addressing each of those areas in order to give our kids a more well-rounded education. Geography, I think, is kind of like this, because you see, just even in this workbook, we're covering globes, map projections, mapping issues. There's physical features, political features, there's continents, oceans, like there's time zones, there are a lot of different things to cover for geography. And so when we're trying to address that in our homeschool, sometimes we'll come across curricula, a curriculum, especially like history type curriculum, where it says that that they'll also cover geography. There's a geography element to it. And sometimes I look at that and think, but is there though? I mean, well, so what are you really covering? Are you covering all these things in your history curriculum? Latitude and longitude, all that? Or are you talking about where things are and what oceans and what like physical features there are in that area? Usually in a history curriculum, it's more like that. And so for those reasons, I do like to, at some point, once or twice during my kids' elementary school years, want to use a workbook kind of like this. This is the first time I've used this one, but something like this where we go into the nitty gritty of some of these more in depth into geography, covering the different geography topics. And so usually I use Evan Moore's Daily Geography, I think it's called, and I have a video about that. So I'll link that down below. And that one's very in depth and covers everything. But this year, since we are going to cover geography a little bit in our history curriculum for this coming up year, Mystery of History, there is a geography element to it, and we'll be doing geography activities through it, like once a week. I wanted something that wasn't quite as in depth. I didn't feel like I needed something as in depth as Evan Moore's Geography Workbook because we will be covering some things through Mystery of History, but I still wanted to get all of these basics. And so that's why I'm using this. But notice that since like map projections, that's one page, that's one lesson. In Evan Moore's Geography Workbook, we cover map projections over several weeks and going over the different types of map projections and going to a little more detail. Same with a lot of these other things, we spend more time on it in Evan Moore's workbook. So think about that when you're trying to decide what to use. Like, what are your academic objectives? Do you want to cover everything geography? Not everything, but do you want to get like the real good basics covering all the standard academic objectives for geography for a certain grade? If you're going to do that, you need Evan Moore's Geography Workbooks. But if you're just doing some review or want some independent work for geography, or like me, are going to cover geography in other ways as well during the year, this might be a good option. That's what I'm hoping, because that's why I chose it. All right. So now that we've talked about all that, let me show you some of the parent helps. So in the back, okay, we'll look at this parents note section in a minute, but for now, let me show you the answer key. So the answer key's in the back, of course. So think about that. If you're just going to hand this workbook to one of your students, I'll probably take this workbook apart, or at least take out the answer keys. So notice with this answer key that you do have your answers here. So you have this little miniaturized version of the page with the answer, but then you also have beneath it some, I don't know if it's instructions. I mean, I guess so. Instructions for the teacher, like in this case, discuss with your child the idea of geography as a guidebook to life on Earth. And so I always find that helpful. A lot of times I might pull up Google Earth and we'll look at whatever's being discussed that way. So that's the answer section. They do have here these parents' notes here. Maybe they're talking about parents' notes. That's what's being underneath here. Whatever. They have this page here, which basically just say, here's topics that are going to be covered and what you can do to help your child. So read the facts and instructions aloud, have some questions and answers, basic stuff. This isn't really as much information as you would get if you were using a homeschool curriculum. If you're getting a curriculum that's targeted to homeschoolers, you'll have more detail in there and more guidance about what to do each day and even how to lesson plan. This isn't one of those things. This is more just an extra workbook to support whatever other geography learning your students doing, whether it be in a traditional school setting or in a homeschool or just for fun, So that's what's covered there. It's not super helpful. So now let's flip through some of these pages so that you can see the types of activities your student might do during their geography learning. And that's actually an aspect of this book that I really like from my first glance at it. There's a variety of activities. The Evan Moore workbook, there's not a whole lot of variety. Which is nice for a student. Like, I have students who they like to know what's happening each day. They don't want a lot of surprises. My youngest, though, I think, enjoy the variety of activities in this workbook. So, like, here you have your true false section or true false page, table to fill out. I don't know, for some reason, I always like these kinds of maps. And this feels like this is just more identifying things. This feels like very much a teaching page. Another table. You have some written answers here. Another table. So there's a lot of like the typical, just answer the question. But there's also, let's see if I can find it, some multiple choice. On this page, you're writing the number for, whatever they're asking you if you're on the map. This looks like a fun activity. I mean, to me, to each his own. So you see here, you have a variety of types of activities. I saw like I showed you earlier, there's even a crossword puzzle. So it won't get too boring. And I like that there's a little bit of color to these pages. I mean, it's not much better than black and white, but I know something that my middle son, who did the Evan Moore geography this past year, something he struggled with, especially toward the end on a couple of maps, was that since it is just black and white, he had a hard time telling like what was what. And with this, at least there's some shading. Like you can obviously see where the oceans are, for example. It is more helpful. And so I do like that, even just that one extra color, so really basically we're just adding blue or purple to the mix here, but just adding that one color really helps a lot. So that was something else I really liked about this. So you've seen some of the types of activities. Now, how am I going to use this? Since this is about 45 lessons, I don't know, somewhere in there. If we think of a school year as being a typical 36 weeks, then you can have a lesson a week and maybe double up a couple of times. Maybe the first week have a few more. So then after that, you just have like a lesson a week. But how I'm going to use this, I may do that. But another thought I had about how to use this, since I'm using this to supplement our geography activities through Mystery of History. What I'm doing for Mystery of History this year is I'm creating a whole unit study out of it, where I'm trying to get more of our learning to integrate with it, like spelling and science and writing and all that, to make it feel more cohesive and to limit the type of kind of mental context switches my kids have to do. I feel sometimes the exhaustion of learning during the days when you're having to change what you're doing, every 20 minutes or 30 minutes, completely change your thinking. And that kind of gets to my kids, I feel sometimes. So I want to try to limit that this year by doing this unit study approach. So I thought, well, maybe the first week we can go over the first couple of weeks. I can go over with my youngest and maybe even my younger too, some of the basics of geography with my kids. And then after that, especially once we get to where we're going over the different continents, I thought, well, maybe I'll try to integrate those into when we're learning about areas that are covered, like history that's covered at those locations. So maybe instead of a lesson a week, it could be, we're learning about something happening in, like, we're going to start off in the Middle East, obviously, because we're doing ancient times. So it wasn't obvious if you didn't know that, but we're starting off with ancient times through Christ. So There would be a lot of time spent in the Middle East. So I thought, well, maybe we can cover Asia or we're here, like Asia during that section. Maybe when we're in Africa, we can cover the Africa section. So I'm going to take a look at it to see if doing it out of order like that, if that'll be a problem. You know what I mean? And if we're doing that, then we won't be working out this workbook every week. And so that's kind of what I'm thinking. Another way that you could kind of beef this up is if, let's say, you do want to cover a lesson a week, maybe find some other activities like on Teachers Pay Teachers when you get to something particular. Like, for example, the map projections. We look at this to see what they say about map projections. They talk about the Mercator projection and interrupted projection. There's more you can go into with map projections. And so you could use this as a spine where you cover that and then maybe look more into, other types of projections, which I can't remember now. But, comparing how the continents look different on different types of map projections. So that's an idea. You could use this as a spine, especially like with latitude and longitude. Maybe have more activities during the week to practice, maybe with maps of different continents or more of a local map or something else to practice latitude and longitude. I think it would be pretty easy to find something else. Teachers Pay Teachers for that. So there's an idea if you want to beef up your learning a little more, your geography learning. As awesome as this looks to me, as excited as I am to use it with my youngest, you may want to cover geography in a more complete way. And if so, go ahead and take a look at this video where I go over the Evan Moore Daily Geography Workbook, and so that you can maybe decide if you want more complete geography learning or if this is enough for you. And I'll talk to you in the next video. Bye-bye.